Chapter 646 War 8. The situation is not looking good. Angelica's expression was one of gloom as she stooped down to examine Hein, who was lying unconscious on the ground at that moment. Luckily he seems fine, but he is completely spent at the moment. She sighed in relief when she realized that Hein was fine and slowly stood up and scanned her surroundings. The area surrounding her was completely empty, as a circle formed in her vicinity as any demons that entered her radius abruptly turned around and charged the other demons in the area with blank looks on their faces. "What are you doing? We're on the same as Whack. Traitor." This was all thanks to her power that allowed her to control the weaker ranked demons. "Report to me your situation." Angelica raised her wrist and whispered something. It wasn't long before she received several replies. "Yuck, I'm not holding out too well. I've lost 8 of my pets already and I'm being pushed back at the moment." The first one to reply was Ava, and it sounded as though she rushed when she spoke. Her manner of speaking made it abundantly clear that the circumstances surrounding her were dismal. "I'm with Ryan at the moment and I'm helping out from above, but the demons have already infiltrated a small parhack." Leopold's audio was cut off in the middle and Angelica's brows furrowed. "What happened?" A crisp voice echoed after Liam's voice. It belonged to none other than Amanda, who kept shooting her arrows in the sky, killing hundreds of demons at the time. "I'm fine for now, but I'm slowly running out of mana. I've been targeted by a few demons, so my mana is depleting rapidly. I'm also fine, but I'm currently fighting against 5 marquee ranked demons, so I don't think I'll be fine for much longer." The response from Han Yufei arrived much later than the one from Amanda, and when it did, Angelica lowered her wrist and furrowed her brows. Raising her head, she looked at Liam, who was in the sky, and her expression turned even grimmer. "This is not good." It was at this precise moment that she became aware of the fact that the war's equilibrium was on the verge of tipping. If they waited just a few more minutes, they would all be in some very serious trouble. Her heart unknowingly quickened. Click. The all too familiar clicking sound echoed inside of Liam's head as he felt something sharp brush past his skin. With just a blink of his eyes, he cocked his head to the right and narrowly avoided the Duke-ranked demon's sword. "You dodged that." A look of surprise appeared on the demon's face. Liam chose not to respond and instead focused his attention on the Duke-ranked demon standing in front of him. His current appearance was identical to Ren's in every way. From the structure of his body, his hair, and his eyes. He was a carbon copy of Ren in every possible way imaginable. To such an extent that Liam had the impression that he was currently in a fight with Ren. There was only one problem. It's not fun. He had already fought with Ren dozens of times before. He knew almost everything about Ren's fighting style. It was effortless for him to counter his usual fast movements. It seemed as though things were getting easier for him, even though he was in a situation that should have been getting harder. "I don't like this." Unknowingly, he was voicing out his displeasure aloud. The Duke-ranked demon paused. "You don't like this?" I don't." Liam shook his head with a clear look of displeasure on his face. "Do you have any idea how many times in the past I've faced off against Ren? It's to the point where I can't even keep track of it all anymore." Actually, it was more like he forgot, but he wasn't going to say that. "I have almost completely committed all of his movements and attacks to memory at this point. Do you seriously believe that if you were to become him, it would make things more difficult for me?" As Liam clenched his teeth and focused his attention on the fake Ren, lightning began to crackle around his body. Unfortunately, that's the furthest thing from the truth. He tapped his sword, producing a similar clicking sound. The Duke-level demon was barely able to parry the attack with a sword swing. Despite this, he was nonetheless pushed back. Liam pursued after him. "See, what you're doing isn't even that impressive. I can do that too." If Ren had been present and witnessed the scene, he would have likely shook his head in dismay. "Since when did my sword art become as common as a cabbage?" For there to be 2 people who were using something similar to the keiki style, Ren would have unquestionably begun re-evaluating his life decisions. Even though theirs were imitations and not identical, the fact that they were able to imitate it to that degree would have left one speechless. Click. As Liam appeared directly in front of the Duke-ranked demon, the lightning crackling around his arm intensified, as did his movements. If he was fast before, he was now impossibly fast. He slashed down with everything he got, forcing the Duke-ranked demon back again. Not enough. The crackling sound of lightning that was occurring all around Liam's body became even louder. His form, which had been visible just moments before, disappeared into the background, leaving behind only two pupils that shone with a brilliant yellow hue. The bolts of lightning danced wildly behind him, and it wasn't long before they seemed to take the shape of a gigantic blue dragon. The second movement of the Ivorian style. Lightning Dragon. The dragon lunged forward, opening its mouth wide before biting in the direction of the Duke-ranked demon. The force with which the attack came was extremely devastating, and it was sufficient to cause the complexion of the Duke-ranked demon to change as several hundreds of blue rings appeared right in front of him. Ring of Vindication, Elemental Discharge, Lightning. The dragon, which had previously been the size of an airplane, shrunk considerably when it saw the circles for the first time, and it wasn't long before it disappeared completely. The Duke-ranked demon smiled when he saw the dragon disappear. His smile didn't last very long because all of a sudden he felt the hair on the back of his head standing up. Shortly after that, he began to hear the echo of a chilly voice next to his ear. "You'd think I'd fall for something like this?" Liam extended his hand in the direction of the demon's head. His movement was simple as he only extended his hand, but it was enough to startle the demon because the speed at which he was moving was simply mind-boggling. Even he, a Duke-ranked demon on the verge of reaching the prince rank, was struggling with his speed. That alone signified just how fast Liam's movements were. Sadly, the unfortunate reality was that the demon wasn't just a Duke-ranked demon in name. At precisely the moment when Liam's hand was about to come into contact with the back of his head, the space around Liam began to crack, and what appeared to be the pointed tips of actual swords began to materialize all around him. Shit. Liam cursed to himself as he stopped whatever he was doing. After that, different white lines started to appear in his field of vision. This was immediately followed by his yellow pupils shining with a greater yellow hue. He then took a single look around him and was able to skillfully sidestep the white lines that were headed in the direction of his body. Unfortunately, the number of white lines was simply far too many for him to completely avoid. Spurt. Spurt. Left shoulder and right thigh. He felt something sharp in those areas. Blinking once, his vision returned to normal, and it was there that he realized that his whole body was covered in blood. He was clearly injured. "Are you bored now?" The voice of the Duke-ranked demon could be heard coming from the direction of his far right. Instead of turning, Liam lowered his head. Not talking. The demon seemed to have misunderstood Liam's silence for confirmation, as he didn't attack again. Instead, he slowly approached Liam, who was floating in the air with a serious look on his face. "What are you thinking about?" The demon was already in front of Liam before he knew it. Secretly, the area around Liam had started to become enveloped by a darkish domain which was slowly isolating the two of them. With a calm look on his face, he carefully scrutinized Liam's body. "Say." Instead of attacking immediately, his figure morphed back to its original form. He no longer looked like Rin. In his mind, the battle was over. With the domain established, it was impossible for him to die. "What do you think about signing a contract with me?" The demon's eyes shone once again, and Liam felt his body grow lethargic once more as his head was filled with soft whispers. A contract appeared in the demon's hands. "Sign the contract." The demon swept his eyes across the battlefield and smiled. "Sign the contract and how?" The demon came to a halt in the middle of his sentence as he abruptly turned his head to look toward the distance, where he sensed a significant shift in the surrounding environment. He wasn't the only one to notice the abrupt change in the environment as the entire battlefield came to a sudden halt. Almost immediately after that, a massive yellow column shot straight up into the sky. Instantaneously, a terrifying, suffocating pressure engulfed everyone in the battlefield. Nearly everyone could feel their breathing becoming more labored, with the exception of the demon that was standing in front of Liam. At the same time, the pupils of several demons in the distance began to contract. This power. The demon gazed off into the distance while maintaining an expression of utter disbelief on his face. In contrast to everyone else present, he had an uncanny ability to gauge the intensity of the pressure that was emanating from the distance. That. Liam weakly turned his head to look in the direction of where the pillar was coming from. A smile spread across his face as he glanced in the demon's direction and mumbled. "That is the existence that I envy. I did it. After suffering for who knew how long, I had finally broken through." A refreshing feeling enveloped my entire body as I slowly stood up from my spot. When I opened my eyes to look around, I was left stunned by what was within my vision. So many scions. There must have been over 1,000,000 distinct particles of varying hues that suddenly materialized all around me. These particles touched my body and moved around it in response to each and every movement I made. I was able to see the scions move away from my hand as I raised it, and it looked almost exactly like I was moving my hand through the water. It was very interesting. Now isn't the time for me to get fascinated with this type of stuff. I raised my head to stare toward the distance, and it was there that my brows furrowed. Luckily, I didn't take too long to break through. My vision suddenly became distorted as I took a casual step forward. With that one step, I was suddenly standing outside the walls of the castle. My gaze traveled across the battlefield, and it was not long before it was drawn to a particular demon off in the distance. Is that Liam? Next to him was a familiar figure. It was none other than Liam. My brows furrowed even more tightly when I saw in just what state he was in. They didn't stay knit for long as they soon relaxed. What an idiot! I muttered to myself quietly as I worked very hard to suppress the urge to shake my head. At first glance, I was able to tell that he had challenged the Duke-ranked demon on purpose because this opponent was the most powerful one on the battlefield. Little did he know that the so-called Duke-ranked demon was on the verge of breaking through to the rank of prince. Actually, he probably knew, but he still didn't care. This fact alone made it harder for me to stop myself from shaking my head. Even though I fixed most of his memories, why can't he act normal for once? This was giving me a headache. Actually, realistically speaking, he was the only one that could have stopped the Duke-ranked demon for as long as he did. Rather than being an idiot, he was the one that pretty much prevented the war from ending early. I was just being too sensitive since he always tended to pull this type of crap. Blinking once, I found myself standing next to Liam and the demon. I calmly opened my mouth and said something after lowering my head to cast a fleeting glance in Liam's direction. Let me handle things for now. Chapter 647 Ren's Return 1. Wait, Ren. I can still fight. I still haven't used my trump card. It doesn't matter. You already had your chance, and honestly, Ren didn't even bother to look at Liam before he shot him. Even if you were to successfully defeat him, the cost would be too great for you to bear. Please return to the castle and allow me to handle the current situation. Tisk. After making a clicking sound with his tongue, Liam sheathed his sword, and the hue that had been swirling around his body began to fade. When he looked into Ren's eyes, he found that he could not bring himself to disobey his orders. The things that he said weren't totally off base. Even though there was a slim chance that he could triumph over the demon that stood in front of him, the price that he would have to pay to defeat that demon would be far too high for him to stomach. In spite of the fact that he often acted on impulse, he was not exactly wishing to die just yet. There were a great number of other goals in his mind that he wanted to accomplish before dying. Dying to some unknown Duke-ranked demon wasn't on the list. Like fighting the Demon King. The one demon that was said to be unbeatable. Now dying against him would indeed be fun. Fine, but just this time. There won't be a next time. His body then fell to the ground and he disappeared immediately after. In the sky, Ren and the Suriel stared at each other. Ren's eyes appeared rather icy in contrast to Suriel's, which shone with a watchful intensity. Opening his mouth, Suriel asked, "Did you just break through?" I thought that was obvious enough. Ren cast a casual glance in the direction of the castle, which was located behind him. He didn't feel the need to lie about his most recent breakthrough. To him, it wasn't going to change the outcome of the fight regardless. Additionally, the phenomenon that his breakthrough had brought into existence ought to have already been a dead giveaway at that point. Clearly, Suriel was just asking to waste time and get a better read on his strength. I see. Duke Suriel closed his eyes once. His wings quickly grew larger, and a powerful force erupted from his body, heading in the direction of Ren like an unstoppable tsunami. When confronted with such intense pressure, Ren simply extended his hand forward and swiped to his right, which allowed him to effortlessly slice through the assault as though it was made out of paper. Not bad. The unassuming actions taken by Ren caused Suriel's expression to become solemn. Even at that point, Suriel maintained a relatively relaxed posture. How about we step it up a notch? The second part of his sentence echoed inside Ren's ear from the back as Ren felt the presence of someone standing right behind him. To his surprise, he could still see Duke Sorial's figure standing in the spot where he had previously stood. It was obvious that he moved at such a rapid pace that he left behind discernible afterimages of himself. Despite this, Rin was able to respond in time as 5 rings materialized directly behind him, forming a stack that stopped Duke Sorial's impending attack. Crack. The attack was slowed down as a result of 4 out of the 5 rings shattering completely. The final ring also shattered, but by the time it did, Rin had already moved a considerable distance away from where he had been standing before. His actions surprised Duke Sorial, who looked at Rin with a surprised look. "So you've also dodged that?" His laid-back demeanor remained consistent the entire time, but his smile was slowly receding. When he moved his hand in front of him, the space in front of him shattered, and his hand disappeared, only to reappear in a flash right next to Rin as the void next to him shattered like broken glass. Cage. The sudden unexpected action taken by Sorial caught Rin off guard as he was unable to deflect the blow in time, and as a consequence he sustained an injury on the back of his neck from which blood began to pour. As if that wasn't bad enough, Duke Sorial continued to attack Rin, resulting in cuts appearing all over Ren's body. Within a very brief amount of time, Ren's body had already become covered in cuts, and blood had started to leak out of the various wounds and onto the ground. Duke Sorial beamed with satisfaction as he took in Ren's predicament and then began speaking. "It's useless. Just because you've advanced to the next level does not mean you can fight on equal grounds with me. It was over 150 years ago that I was promoted to the Duke rank. Even if you had managed to stabilize the mana within your body, you would not have been able to fight me as our strengths still differed by a large margin. In other races, Duke Sorial's rank was roughly equivalent to an SS+. Compared to Rin, who had just broken through to SS- rank, there was still a significant gap in their abilities, and this was what he was attempting to convey to Rin, who was struggling to avoid his attacks. If all of that wasn't bad enough, Ren's level of experience paled in comparison to that of Duke Sorial, who had lived for over 500 years. In his head, there wasn't much of a fight left to be had. Although he was initially surprised by Ren's appearance, the surprise was where it ended. "I'll make sure to torture you a bit more for everything you've done over the past few months. All of my discarded plans and subordinates." As he continued to attack, Duke Sorial experienced a sudden outburst of rage as his attacks grew increasingly vicious. Rin, who could barely avoid his attacks, began to bleed even more blood. Everyone on the ground was able to see Ren's lonesome figure floating above them as their hearts began to sink. The gap between Duke Sorial and Rin. Everyone who was looking up from below could make out every detail perfectly. Instantaneously, the morale of the demons grew stronger, whereas the orcs' morale became weaker. The conflict on the battlefield below took a new direction as the demons' attacks started to become more fierce while those on the orc side started to become less intense. They were all beginning to feel hopeless about the outcome of the war. Whack! After being shot in the head with an arrow, a demon toppled to the ground, sending it crashing down hard against a pack of other demons that were fighting beneath the Orson castle. It was at that moment that another arrow formed with a flick of Amanda's bowstring. This arrow was perfectly aimed at the exposed core of the demon, and when it was suddenly released, the arrow shattered the demon's core into millions of different pieces. If that wasn't enough, with another flick of her finger, the arrow exploded and a large explosion resounded throughout the air, completely disintegrating the demons that were beside the fallen demon. Boom. Another few down. How many does that make? Amanda had long lost count of how many demons she had killed at this point. The only thing she could feel was her dwindling mana and the searing pain on her fingertips. "It's bleeding." Her mouth twitched when she noticed that her fingers were bleeding. Evidently, all that shooting had injured her finger. Normally, she wouldn't have a problem because she could simply take out a potion to heal her wounds. Unfortunately, the situation didn't allow her to do so as her hand continued to flick her bowstrings as demons appeared from all sides. Wherever she looked, a new demon appeared, and thus she was forced to swiftly move and twist her body in a way that granted her the ability to lock sight with the demons that were attacking her. It was fortunate that she had her skill, Target Lock, activated, as its functions were rather close to an aimbot. She didn't even really need to aim properly to kill a demon with such skill. The only downside was the large amount of mana that the skill consumed. Thud. As demons continued to descend from the top of the castle and attempt to attack Amanda, her body continued to leap into the air and twist. Her bow let loose 3 arrows that flew at horrifying speeds. One after the other, the arrows pierced the skulls of 3 demons, causing them to fall to the ground with great force. Eche. Amanda gently touched down on the ground, and then she channeled her mana in such a way that it formed 2 sharp mana-based ends at the tail ends of her bow. After that, she twisted her heel and turned around. Spurt. As the sky began to rain an increasing number of corpses, a dark bloody rain threatened to soak all of her clothing, greatly alarming Amanda. Fortunately, the blood never spilled on her clothes as a thin layer of mana covered her body. As if a clean freak like her would ever want her clothes dirty by blood. Ha. I can't last much longer. As she felt her vision begin to warp slightly, she immediately severed the head of another demon by cutting it off with the sharp end of her bow as if it were a sword. The thin layer of mana around her body was starting to dwindle, and she could feel her breathing becoming rougher with each passing second. It had been at least 8 hours since she had begun to fight, and it was unavoidable for her to eventually start losing stamina as a result. Instead, the fact that she could fight for as long as she did until now is already an extremely impressive feat in and of itself. Even so, everyone had a limit and Amanda had just about reached hers. Shoo! Another arrow flew from her bow, and it impaled 2 demons on its way through their skulls. When she felt another presence behind her, she turned around and flicked her finger once more. However, as soon as she turned around, she was horrified to see that 8 demons were diving toward her at extreme speeds. Oh no! At this precise moment, Amanda became fully aware that she was in a precarious situation. When she flicked her hand, an arrow materialized in the middle of her bow. However, as she pulled the string, she realized that the arrow was fading in and out of existence. A definitive demonstration that there was insufficient mana to continue sustaining it. She was suddenly overcome with a sense of impending doom as the demons sneaked up on her without her even realizing it. Amanda clenched her teeth together, causing the arrow that was in her bow to vanish, and then she took a stance, getting ready to engage in hand-to-hand combat with the demons. Die, human scum! In the split second before she came face to face with the demons, she was able to make out a muttering of profanity coming from the direction of the demons as they closed in on her. It was obvious that she had garnered the resentment of the demons, especially after the fact that she was responsible for the deaths of so many of their fellow soldiers. Amanda took a few steps forward and braced herself for battle against the demons, showing no sign of the slightest bit of fear. Come, ha! Just as Amanda's bow was about to make contact with the demon's sharp nails, her entire body froze up. Boom! In the next instant, the 8 demons obliterated right before Amanda's very eyes as blood spilled all over her clothes. Ha! Amanda stood there in a daze as she looked toward her right, where she saw a familiar figure standing not so far from her with his fist pointed in her general direction. The figure was none other than Han Yufei. Chapter 648 Ren's Return. Amanda's eyes lit up the moment they caught sight of Han Yufei, and the moment that happened she finally let go of her tension and knelt on the ground on one knee. Thank you. Amanda muttered a few words of gratitude as her body slowly started to twitch from exhaustion. Without a second thought, she took out several potions that Melissa had given her and gulped them down in one go. As soon as she downed the potions, she started to feel a warm sensation that spread throughout her entire body, and the wounds on her fingers and other parts of her body started to slowly heal. In case that wasn't enough, her mana and stamina were also beginning to return to normal, and little by little, a small flush began to spread across her previously pale face. How strong! Amanda was surprised to see how potent the effects of the potions were. Considering that she was the young mistress of the most powerful guild in the human domain, it did not come as a surprise to know that she had taken a lot of potions in her life. She naturally possessed an accurate understanding of the potency of the effects produced by these standard potions. However, when compared to the potions that Amanda had just consumed, which had been given to her by Melissa, she realized that there was a vast difference between the two. As a matter of fact, she had the impression that she was now able to fight once more. Incredible! This discovery astounded her as she slowly stood up. Are you okay? It was then that Han Yufei walked over. Amanda nodded her head as she turned her head to look at him. I'm fine now, thank you. Things would have been much more difficult for her if it hadn't been for his prompt intervention. That's great. Han Yufei refocused his attention on the demons that were approaching the castle from below. Just as he was about to take a step forward and was about to once again engage in combat with the demons, his foot came to a halt and he slowly turned around as if remembering something. With a visible shudder of his body, he looked at Amanda with a pitiful look on his face. Hey. His voice quivered slightly. What's going on? Amanda was taken aback by his unexpected actions, and she stared at him with a perplexed expression on her face. What exactly was it that caused him to react in such a manner? Amanda didn't have to wait very long before she figured out the answer to that question. However, after she heard his subsequent words, she was left at a complete loss for words. Can you do me a favor and stop telling him that his charm is lower than mine? It's been causing a lot of problems. Amanda's eyes blinked a couple of times as she tried to process his words. The moment she did so, she became aware that her hand was covering her mouth, and before she even realized what was happening, she had already started giggling uncontrollably. Please. He's weaker than the human that I previously fought. While staring at Ren, who was covered in blood and had been severely beaten, this was the realization that came to Suriel. Ren was in a terrible state, but what was even worse was that he didn't put up even the slightest bit of resistance when he was being attacked, which made the situation even worse for him. Is he really the human in the memories? When Suriel recalled the memories of the previous human he had been fighting, he had the distinct impression that something was wrong with the memories he received. He wasn't supposed to be this weak. Despite the fact that Suriel was aware of Ren's weaknesses due to the memories he had acquired from Liam, things should not have been this simple. Something was amiss, so he instinctively stopped attacking and retreated, his eyes brimming with alertness. Obviously, he did not forget to leave a mark on the human's body before he left. What sort of game are you playing at? Suriel asked as he scanned the human in front of him. After taking a second look, he was unable to detect any menacing power emanating from the human. Despite this, he continued to listen to his gut instincts, which told him to retreat. There was something really odd about the human. What game am I playing at? And shortly thereafter, the human slowly raised his head. When their eyes met, the human brushed back his hair. At the moment, he sported an expression that could be described as both indifferent and icy, giving off the impression that he did not possess any emotion. Things became especially alarming when his eyes started to become a hollow gray color. I'm not playing any games. I'm merely just trying to adjust myself to this new rank. He extended both hands to his sides while mumbling something to himself. It isn't every day that one experiences such a drastic rise in power. The sky started to dim as a direct result of his direct actions. A powerful hue began to envelop Ren's body as the sky began to show signs of cracking and tearing. At the same time, his SS-rank strength erupted from his body. What's this? After being startled, Suriel looked around him with a confused expression on his face. The power that was slowly enveloping the battlefield was very intimidating, to say the least. Enough to cause even Suriel to feel some sort of strain. However, if that wasn't all, martial body. The weight that was pressing down on Suriel became significantly heavier by that light murmur coming from Ren's mouth as Suriel's expression finally changed. On the other hand, Ren's body began to undergo transformations as his muscles began to swell, his veins ruptured, and his rank steadily increased. Within an instant, Ren's rank shot up from SS-rank all the way towards this rank. It can't be. Gulp. Suriel involuntarily swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he moved back. Ren's power increased to a dangerously high level for an unknown reason. Suriel felt pressure build from all of his sides as his eyes met with Ren's, who was standing in front of him. No, I can't let things continue like this. Suriel's expression hardened as he became aware of how dire the situation was, and a terrifying energy began to emanate from his body at the same time. In his mind, he tried to reassure himself. There is no need for alarm. Since I possess the previous human's memories, I should be able to anticipate his movements. He scanned his surroundings and recalled something. If I'm not wrong, soon enough sword energies will come crashing down toward me at incredible speeds. I should get out of here as fast as possible. After taking in his surroundings, Suriel came to a conclusion very quickly. He furiously glared in the direction of his opponent while rapidly expanding the wings on his back. Then with a flap of his wings, his body zoomed in Ren's direction. If I head to where he is, he will be forced to stop whatever he is doing. After all, there's no way he can attack himself, right? His body accelerated through the air as he approached Ren swiftly. When Suriel finally came face to face with Ren, just as he had predicted, he watched him furrow his brows and then abort his attack entirely. Clearly, he had realized Suriel's intention. "Ha, I bet you didn't see this coming." Suriel revealed a crazy smile after successfully stopping Ren's attack. Shying. As he slashed at the human that was in front of him, he didn't squander even a single second of the valuable extra time that he had bought for himself and attacked with everything he had. Unfortunately, Ren was able to avoid his attack with just a small step backward. Suriel's heart sank, but it wasn't long before it calmed down again. That's right, I still have that. His special power. The one that allowed him to gain an advantage over his opponent. After one more beat of his wings, his body lurched backward and he came to a stop in the middle of the air. This should be far enough. "Oh, are you going to do something?" Suriel was startled by a sudden whisper in his ear. When he turned around and saw Ren standing directly behind him, his expression changed drastically. "What?" Before he could even begin to comprehend how Ren had appeared behind him, he had to repeatedly close and reopen his eyes. Only then was he able to start making sense of what had happened. He didn't give it a second thought before hurriedly twisting his body and slashing in Ren's direction. Clay. Ren's sword, which Suriel had not realized had been removed from its sheath, deftly blocked his claws as they attempted to cut him in half. Clang, clang, clang. Shockwaves propagated throughout the atmosphere as the two engaged in a duel in midair, with Suriel attempting an attack and Ren defending himself with a simple turn of his sword. It also had to be noted that Ren had only been using one hand throughout the entire exchange. It was clear to those spectating that he was the one who was at an advantage at the moment. What's going on? Suriel wondered to himself as he continued to attack. I'm a Duke-ranked demon that is on the verge of breaking through to the Prince rank. He's merely a human that has just broken through to Duke rank. I should be having the upper hand. What was going on? Things didn't make sense at all. Clank. When his sword and Suriel's nails collided, the result was a sonic boom in the form of a pressurized wind gale that spread out across the sky. Hayak. In the aftermath of the assault, Suriel discovered that he had been pushed back by several meters. He raised his head to look at Ren, who seemed rather composed and calm. As a result of the exchange, he had also taken a few steps back. As a matter of fact, it appeared that he had retreated a few steps further than Suriel. This was a resounding demonstration that Suriel's strength was indeed superior to that of Ren, and it was at this very moment that Suriel came to a sudden realization. It's his technique. At this precise moment, Suriel had the epiphany that Ren's strategy or technique, whichever it was the thing that was enabling him to engage evenly in head-to-head combat with him. Currently, Ren's whole body was riddled with wounds and he looked to be in a sorry state, but why do I feel pressured? Just his gaze alone made Suriel feel uncomfortable. He was unsure of exactly what he had done before, but the end result was that his rank was now only marginally inferior to his own and he was fighting evenly with him. Perhaps even winning. No, this can't be happening. I'll give you two choices. Ren's emotionless voice rang inside Suriel's head, cutting his thoughts away. Suriel forcefully calmed himself down and calmly asked, "What are the two choices?" "We stop this meaningless fight and you submit to me." As expected. Suriel's teeth clenched when he heard Ren's words. He had long estimated that this was what Ren was going to say. The only reason he had asked was because he wanted to buy himself some time to use his skill. The one that allowed him to duplicate his opponent's point of envy. At this moment, he realized that this was the only way for him to salvage the situation. Almost there. He raised his head to look at Ren. "What is the other choice?" Ren scoffed as his eyes began to dull and an incomparably powerful pressure began to erupt from his body. "If you choose to attack, I'll kill you." "Kill me?" Suriel was left stunned by Ren's answer. Letting the answer sink into his mind, he suddenly burst out laughing. Has all that power gotten into your head? Do you actually think you can defeat me with the power you showed?" He was strong, that was certain, but for him to actually kill him? You've gone completely crazy. All that power has gotten into your head. I guess. Ren responded in a sluggish manner while bringing his hand forward and repeatedly clenching and unclenching his hand. Honestly, having just broken through to this new rank and feeling all the power that comes with it, I would find it quite saddening if you were to choose to submit to me. After all, I do want to have some fun as well. You sound quite confident in yourself. Suriel gritted his teeth in a covert manner. Suddenly, a purple hue erupted from out of his body, and his figure began to transform. So that's your choice. A soft smile soon began to spread on Ren's lips as he extended his hand. I couldn't have asked for anything better. When he closed his fist, the surrounding air suddenly became icy. Shortly after that, the sky began to twist and cracks formed all over the sky. Bright yellow swords began to emerge from the cracks in the sky, with their tips all pointed in Suriel's direction. Let's see. Ren lowered his head to look at Suriel's, and as he did so he slowly pressed his hand down, causing the swords that were floating in the air to plummet to the ground like a torrential downpour of death. What's going on? What's that? The ongoing conflict below was slowed down as everyone turned their attention to the sky in order to observe the phenomenon that was taking place in the atmosphere as an insurmountable pressure bore down over a large radius that encompassed several kilometers. The very instant that they saw the enormous swords raining down from the heavens, many people felt a tightening in their chests as they swallowed mouthfuls of saliva and focused their attention on the two individuals that stood in the sky. At this moment, everyone knew that the outcome of the conflict between the two would dictate the real winner of the war. Instantly, everyone stopped whatever they were doing and focused their attention on the conflict above. Chapter 649 Ren's Return 3. As soon as the swords started to fall down toward the ground, the world started to shake as an overwhelming force began pushing down toward the ground. Come, let me see how much more you can entertain me. With an expression that suggested he was looking down on the world, Ren continued to press his hand downward as more and more swords appeared from the void and extended toward the world. Mana Agglomeration, Sky Rapture. This was the name of the move that Ren was utilizing at that very moment. It was a skill that was exclusive to him and was not a component of the Keiki style. Ren was now able to exert control over all of the scions that were located within a few kilometers of him as a result of his successful establishment of a stronger connection with the scions that were present in the atmosphere. When compared to before, he was on a completely different level right now, at least from a realistic standpoint. He had improved his strength to such a degree that the Keiki style was no longer as useful or significant as it had been in the past. It was necessary to point out that Ren's current strength had already surpassed that of Grandmaster Keiki when he was in his prime. The Keiki style, despite the fact that it was still somewhat useful, was not something that he would consider using very frequently anymore. Shio. As they descended from the void, the tangible sword energies that were as thick and long as a tree all focused their attention on Suriel, who was floating in the air slightly below Ren. His figure, which had been undergoing a transformation earlier, had already finished morphing and resumed an appearance that was eerily similar to Ren's. The expression on Suriel's face, which had become identical to that of Ren's, changed to one of bewilderment. What's going on? He looked up at the sky with shock. The figure that you envy is none other than yourself? How is this possible? As soon as Suriel realized that he had transformed back into the previous form he had taken, his heart went through a period of extreme upheaval. As he processed this information, he was stunned to discover that Ren envied himself the most. How was this possible? No, wait. His eyes widened in surprise as he took a moment to process the information stored in his memory. Ah, I see. Suriel finally cracked a smile as his body once again underwent some changes. His hair began to change from black to white in a gradual manner as his once blue eyes underwent a change as well, gradually transitioning to a grayish color, and his face lost all expression as it became expressionless. Suddenly, from deep within Suriel's body, a strange power surged out. At the same time, all kinds of different memories surfaced within his mind, and everything around him lost its color. As he lifted his head to stare at the incoming sword attacks, his head cocked ever so slightly, and he slowly raised his hand above his head. The sky beneath him ripped into shreds as various black-colored swords warped beneath him in a threatening manner as the air around him stirred. In the time it took for more than 100 swords to materialize in the space beneath him, the swords that were coming from Ren had already begun to draw closer to him. This should do. The sword energies that were buried beneath Suriel rose into the air with a single motion of his hand and were precisely directed toward the oncoming storm of swords. The two attacks quickly collided with one another, and the world slowly started to lose its color. At the same time that an eerie silence engulfed the entire planet, visible circular pulses that changed color from red to gray and back to red began to spread out across the entire surface of the world. It was then that it happened. Boom, boom, boom. The aftermath of the conflict between the two powers resulted in the sky being filled with the deafening sounds of explosion after explosion, while the land beneath it was ripped to pieces and mountains were leveled. Get out of the way. Run. As a result of the two attacks, the demons and orcs that remained on the ground were quickly ripped to pieces, which caused widespread panic and chaos. Everyone who was standing there retreated quickly and looked for somewhere to take cover. As the residual energy from the clash above continued to spread throughout the entirety of the battlefield, no one was safe, whether they were enemies or allies, as many died in a matter of seconds. It was fortunate that orcs were born with powerful bodies and were not as affected as the demons, who were completely annihilated, their cores included. Nonetheless, the number of orcs seriously injured as a result of their clash was nothing short of small. It didn't take long for the chaos to calm down, but by the time the lingering energy from Ren and Suriel's exchange had dissipated, the world was already in a state of complete devastation. The ground beneath them was completely leveled and thick cracks appeared on the ground beneath them. Further adding to that, all of the vegetation that stood beneath had been completely eradicated. Ah! Ugh! Help! Only the sound of orcs and demons wailing in agony and pleading for assistance could be heard throughout the world. Unfortunately, no one came to their aid as everyone was focused on the two figures in the air that bore a striking resemblance to one another. I think I just found something very interesting. Suriel spoke while floating gently in the air and gazed at his new body with awe and fear. He then gently raised his head to stare at Run in the sky. Who would have thought that there was another part of you? After catching a glimpse of his memories, Suriel came to know about the other Ren's existence. And with the fact that Ren had experienced his power firsthand, Suriel was able to assimilate with the memories of the other Ren extremely well. It would not be incorrect to say that he was in an entirely different league than he was in the past. The current Ren who had previously bothered him no longer appeared as threatening. Meeting Ren's line of sight, Suriel smiled. I guess it's my turn to say to you to keep me entertained. I hope you last for enough time to appease me. Suriel gently pointed his finger in Ren's direction. At that precise instant, sword energy materialized right in front of Ren's head. Seemingly able to read Suriel's intentions, when the sword suddenly appeared in front of him, it did not present any difficulties for him. Instead, he flicked his hand forward and scattered the energy in front of him. That being said, a troubled frown soon appeared on his face as he stared at Suriel with a vigilant look. Ren understood that the situation had turned for the worst, and it wasn't long before the situation turned from worse to dire as Suriel appeared right in front of him with his hand extended toward his face. Ren was taken aback by his speed, which was on par with teleportation, and as his vision began to be obscured by the approaching hand that was inching closer to his face, he felt his movements become sluggish. Not good. At that precise moment, Ren became fully aware of the fact that he would die the moment Suriel's hand touched his face as the space around him started to distort and his figure began to fade. Nice try. Despite this, Suriel made a slow turn to the right and advanced his hand in such a way that it appeared as though he could perfectly read his movements. Because of the rapidity of his movements, those who were observing from below were unable to make out what was taking place. Nonetheless, their confusion was short-lived as they witnessed a figure plummet to the ground at breakneck speed. Boom! The earth was torn apart by a subsequent explosion, and a sizable crater was produced on the surface of the ground. After the dust had settled, standing in the middle of the crater was Ren as blood dripped from the side of his mouth. He wiped the blood in the corner of his mouth and stared toward the sky where Suriel was standing. At the moment he was looking at his body with wonder as a smile slowly pulled on his face. What fascinating power! He murmured in a voice loud enough for everyone to hear. Suriel's attention shifted in Ren's direction and he soon chuckled. How about I present you with the same offer that you previously gave me? He poked fun at him while his smile gradually expanded into a broad grin. Word for word he started to repeat the words that Ren had previously told him. I'll give you two choices. We stop this meaningless fight and you submit to me. If you choose to attack, I'll kill you. Ren's expression remained as emotionless as ever as he continued to stare at Suriel. At this precise moment, his body was riddled with wounds and his body repeatedly twitched. Those who were observing the scene could plainly see that Ren was at his wits' end, whereas Suriel appeared to be in a significantly better state. The many people who were watching felt a tightening in their chests, which brought Suriel even more joy. He took in their expression with ecstasy as the grin on his face twisted all the way toward his eyes. How about it? Are you willing to submit to me? Suriel continued to tease with a broad grin on his face. Ren, on the other hand, maintained his expressionless gaze fixed upon Suriel while he continued to stare at him in complete silence. Whew! It did not take long before his eyes gradually closed, and the hue that had been revolving around his body began to shrink toward his body. The world came to a sudden standstill as a gentle breeze caused Ren's clothes to flutter. Ren's silence brought the entire world to a silence as everyone's focus turned on him. His next words would decide the outcome of the war. The silence continued for what seemed to be an eternity as a stifling and suffocating atmosphere permeated every corner of Amora. So? Suriel questioned as he cautiously stared at Ren, who was calmly standing on the surface of the crater. Why aren't you answering? Hearing Suriel's words, Ren's eyes gradually opened and he shook his head. I'm good. Shortly after that, a tremendous power erupted from his body, causing the entire world to shake. Simultaneously, a pillar of light emerged from Ren's body and tore through the dark clouds that were above him in the sky. Pointing his finger in Suriel's direction, Ren mumbled. It may still be too early for me to use this move, but I'll give it a go. Chapter 650 Ren's Return 4. I focused my attention on Suriel, who was currently emanating an inexplicable power from his body as he stood in the sky. While I had my attention fixed on Suriel, I felt an immediate and significant shift take place within my body. Unbeknownst to me, a hazy tinge began to emanate from my body, and simultaneously, a sizable tear formed directly above my head. What I was about to do now wasn't something I had ever done before, nor was I confident in performing. In fact, I was currently taking a significant risk. There were 5 distinct movements that comprised the keiki style. Each movement was distinct from the previous one, and the level of complexity steadily increased from one to the next as the sequence progressed. Prior to his passing, Grandmaster Keiki had only completed the 5th movement. That was his very last movement. In the past, I had mentioned the possibility of there being a 6th movement to the keiki style. One that Grandmaster Keiki, who had long since passed away, had not been able to find before his eventual death. Over the course of the past few years, I had done everything in my power to try to feel that final 6th movement, but I could never for the life of me feel myself unearthing that movement. I tried everything I could think of, but it was all to no avail. It seemed as though it wasn't something I could perform with my set of skills. I was still far too weak to sense it. Of course, that was until I caught a glimpse of it. The memories of my other self is what is making this possible. It was during that brief period of time that I was able to witness the full extent of my other self's power, and it was from there that I caught a glimpse of the 6th movement. There were many other things that I saw back then, but the 6th movement was the thing that stuck with me during that time. I didn't really understand it back then as I was still too weak, but things were different now. Now that I had broken through to SS-rank, as if all the pieces of the puzzle had been placed in the right order, it finally clicked inside of my mind and an image appeared within my darkened mind. It was a single sword. One bright and tangible sword that had a translucent sheen to it and appeared to hold some kind of unexplained power. One that appeared to be capable of turning the world on its axis with a single blow. It was a sword with unfathomable power. Still, I could sense that the sword was not something that I could still wield with the strength that I possessed at this time. It seemed so close yet so far. I wanted to spend more time dwelling over that sword and study it better before using it, but as I stared at Suriel, who was currently taking the same fighting style as the other me, I knew that this was the only shot I had at victory. I can only beat him this way. The other me was simply too strong. He was a being that I didn't think I could ever match up with in my entire life. Maybe this weird sword is the only way that I can beat him. Suriel's ability only expanded toward what my body experienced while my other self took over. Even though he had most likely caught a glimpse of the 6th movement from my recollections, It was impossible for him to perform because it was not something that could be accomplished with a mere glance. If he had absorbed the memories of my alternate self, it would have been possible, but he had absorbed my memories and I had no real knowledge of it. Nonetheless, his fighting experience and his movements were the same as my alternate self. Thus, I knew that performing the sixth movement was the only way for me to win. As I carefully pointed my finger in Suriel's direction, the image of the sword that had been floating around in my head started to become clearer, and the tear that had been standing directly above me started to gradually expand. As a yellow tip began to surface from behind the crack, the vegetation that was located outside of the area of the land that had been leveled began to sway in the direction of the tip as if it had been attracted to it. "What is this? No, wait, what are you doing?" Suriel's shocked voice could be heard from above as he stared at the large tip of the sword protruding from the small crack that had just appeared directly above my head. Instantaneously, he attempted to attack me, but the pressure from the sword above me completely obliterated any and all attacks that were headed in my direction. "No, what's going on?" As waves of energy began to spread throughout the entire world, the clouds in the sky began to separate, and a domineering aura began to descend upon the world. As time went on, a sword began to emerge from the fissure, and the pressure that was squeezing the world to its very core gradually became more intense. Pivifi. I coughed up a mouthful of blood at the exact moment that the tip of the sword emerged from the crack and revealed a portion of its translucent body. My body shook erratically while I tried to remain standing on the ground, and the sword flickered in and out of existence. Suriel, who was bracing himself for my sudden attack, had a sudden change in expression as the look of fright on his face quickly faded and he regained his composure. "So that's what it was, your body can't keep up with whatever you're trying to do." I could feel the relief in his voice as he said those words. Clearly, he had been given a fright by my sudden actions. "All right then, I'll take your actions as a refusal of my previous offer." Following that, he gradually extended his hand and opened the palm of his hand. A pitch-black spherical ball began to form directly in front of his palm as the world around him began to gradually lose its color. As if the world around him was merging with him, everything within his immediate surroundings began to warp as an energy that was on a level comparable to the tip of the sword began to spread across the world. The sky began to crackle with lightning as the ground below was set ablaze, and the demons that were trying to aid their fallen comrades beneath scurried away as quickly as they could. "This is worse than I had expected." I cursed when I realized just how powerful the move that Suriel was about to perform was. In addition to this realization, it dawned on me just how powerful the move that I was attempting to perform actually was. I could hear a small cracking sound coming from the bones in my body, while at the same time that I could also feel the muscle fibers in my body steadily snapping. Actually, it isn't about the strength of the move but my knowledge of it. At that very moment, I was attempting to carry out a move that I had never practiced before and with which I had only recently become acquainted with. I was essentially trying to run without knowing how to walk. I was out of my mind for even trying this move, but his is the only way. It was the only way for me to win this fight. Because of this, I chose to disregard the stress that my body was going through and instead maintain a singular concentration on the sword that was forming directly above my head. Unknowingly, my body began to levitate in the air as my feet no longer touched the ground. Kish. Rumble. Rumble. The world shook as two energies secretly clashed against each other, causing my head to swell with heat and every part of my body to throb with agonizing pain. Ha. As the pain that I was experiencing left me gasping for air and my eyes began to sting, tears began to form in the corners of my eyes. My life, which had been tormented by nothing but pain, was once again subjected to inhuman-like pain as blood poured down my wounds, and the tip that was hanging above my head finally revealed its body in all of its majesties as two gigantic ripples spread out in the sky, destroying everything within the immediate surroundings. As I moved my hand forward in a gentle motion, the wounds on the rest of my body began to stretch, and the bones in my hand began to shatter. Yet as I glared at Suriel, who was gazing back at me with a maniacal look, I clenched my teeth and continued to press forward. Fucking go. At my shout, half of the sword poked out from the crack as the world around me lost its color and everything distorted. This is my last warning, human. Give up and submit and I will spare you. If you choose to attack, I will kill you and all the humans that you brought with you. As he stared at the blade that was aimed squarely at him, Suriel's eyes narrowed and hardened into a fierce glare. Suriel felt a chill run down his spine as he stared at the tip of the sword that was aimed in his direction. At the same time, he furiously circled the demonic energy that was contained within his body as he prepared to unleash his most powerful move. Death. That was what came into Suriel's mind as he stared at the enormous sword that stood in front of him. Just by giving it a simple look, he was able to sense a penetrating force directed toward himself. At the same time, he unknowingly swallowed a mouthful of saliva out of anxiety. How can he unleash such an attack? Suriel thought to himself as he furiously continued to circulate the demonic energy inside of his body. The purple-black sphere that was floating in front of his palm began to grow in size over the course of a short period of time, and it wasn't long before it ballooned up to the size of a small sun. The power that was emanating from his attack was just as menacing as the one that Ren was preparing to unleash. Pivifi. Nevertheless, just like Ren, the move that Suriel performed took a significant toll on his body, as evidenced by the fact that he spewed a mouthful of blood and staggered around in the air as his eyes turned white for a brief moment. Crack. Suriel's right pec made a subtle cracking sound at the exact moment he spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes widened as the sound reached his ears and his face stiffened in horror. No! Suddenly, Suriel let out a piercing scream as he stared at his hand, which was covered in his own blood. No, no, no! Suriel continued to scream in his ear as his eyes became completely bloodshot while he glared at Ren with obvious intent to kill him. It appeared as though he had completely lost control of his mind. How dare you? It's all your fault. Prince rank. The highest rank that a demon could achieve outside of the king rank, which was considered to be impossible to achieve, with only one precedent in the past. Jezebeth, the current demon king. Attaining a higher rank automatically confers a higher status, and once one reaches the prince rank, they have achieved the highest status possible. One could be forgiven for assuming that demons holding ranks lower than prince/princess, such as a duke, also enjoyed a high status. That was accurate the majority of the time. However, there were a few exceptions. One of the exceptions to this rule was the clan that the demon belonged to. The more powerful the clan, the greater the number of duke-ranked demons that lived within it. The more common duke-ranked demons were, the lower the position they held within the clan. Another exception was if the demon had committed a crime, such as eating the core of another demon. Suriel, who belonged to the most powerful clan, the Clan of Envy, and who had previously consumed multiple demon cores in an effort to break through to the duke rank, was sadly one who fell into this category. All of this stemmed from his desperation to reach duke rank back in the past. It was this sin of his that led to him being trapped in such a run-down planet known as Amora, and it was also his duke rank strength that prevented the demons from directly killing him. Despite this, after more than 60 years of living on this planet, Suriel's greatest desire was to depart from this location once and for all. All he needed to do to get out of this place was to break through to prince rank. Once he broke through to prince rank, there would be no one to stop him. He was close. So very close. Yet, crack. A simple cracking sound was all he heard, but it was the sound that signaled the end of his hopes and dreams as the prince rank, which he had been so close to attaining just a few moments earlier, suddenly moved out of his reach. When Suriel's demonic energy began to spiral out of control and his eyes began to bleed black blood, the sphere in front of him condensed and the world around him twisted. In all honesty, it was only natural for Suriel to lose his mind. After all, it had taken him more than a century to get to this point. Who wouldn't react the same way if they were put in the same position as him? As Suriel pushed his hand forward with great force and sent the ball toward Ren's location, he wore a look of insanity on his face. At the same time, the wings that were located behind his back rapidly expanded. Ah! Suriel let out another crazed scream as he ferociously glared in Ren's direction. Die! 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 In response to Suriel's sudden outburst, Ren remained calm as he tried his best to suppress the agonizing pain and the constant fractures that appeared all over the bones in his body. The moment that he heard Suriel's roar and felt the attack head his way, Ren's body had already reached a point where almost every bone of his body had fractured and the muscles on the upper part of his body had ruptured. Damn it. Unfortunately, when Suriel launched his attack, the sword that was hovering above his head was still only half exposed, and he was well aware that he had long since reached the point where he could go no further. Ack! Consequently, with another scream, Ren pushed his hand forward. and the tear from which the sword was emerging slowly closed, thereby severing the sword in half and leaving behind an exposed portion of the other half. Still, it was enough. Ren extended his hand while tightly clenching his teeth together at the same time. He then raised his head to stare at the oncoming assault, and while doing so he murmured in a low tone, "Go." As soon as he finished speaking those words, the sword that had been hovering above his head vanished in an instant, and the world was immediately engulfed in an eerie silence as all living beings on the planet held their breath in anxiety. As everything came to a sudden halt, Ren's sword reappeared in front of the purplish-black sphere, its tip gently touching the edge of the spherical ball of energy as it did so. After that, the entire world became completely gray as gentle ripples spread outward from the point of contact between the two attacks. These ripples added to and subtracted from the world's coloration with each succeeding ripple, twisting the world's visual from gray to normal in a repeating fashion. This went on for what seemed like an eternity until all of a sudden, a gigantic red cloud appeared in the sky. It was like something out of a nightmare. Boom. A terrifying explosion that sounded like it was going to break the world in half reverberated all over the world. Ren's vision turned black and the world trembled.